You already lost today. Not to laziness. Not to failure. To a rectangle of glass you picked up 45 minutes ago to check one thing, and now you cannot even name what that thing was. You watched someone else's life. You scrolled through opinions you will forget by tomorrow. And somewhere inside you, something quiet and important went dark. This is not about productivity. This is not about apps, morning routines, or hacking your schedule. This is about something older and more serious. Your mind is the most powerful instrument you will ever own, and right now, something else is playing it. After this, distraction will never feel the same again. Chapter 1. Your attention is not yours anymore. Somewhere in a glass building in San Francisco, a team of engineers sat around a table and asked a single question. Not how do we help people. Not how do we make something useful. The question was this: how do we make it harder to leave than to stay? That question is the origin of everything you are struggling with. Not your weakness. Not your lack of discipline. Not some flaw in your character that you have been quietly ashamed of for years. The origin is that question, asked in a boardroom by people who were very good at their jobs, backed by billions of dollars, and pointed directly at the most valuable thing you own: your attention. The truth is, the modern phone is not a communication device. It stopped being that a long time ago. It is an extraction device. Every notification that pulses, every red badge that appears on an icon, every feed that never reaches a bottom, these were not accidents of design. They were solutions to a specific engineering problem. The problem was your leaving. The solution was to make you stay. Most people react. They feel the pull, and they follow it. They pick up the phone without deciding to. They scroll without choosing to. They look up 20 minutes later with a vague low-grade feeling that something was taken from them, but they cannot name what or when. That feeling has a name. It is called attention capture. And it is not happening to you randomly. In 2013, Tristan Harris was a design ethicist at Google. He built an internal presentation, a slide deck he shared with colleagues, that named what the industry was quietly doing. He called it a race to the bottom of the brainstem. The race was not about who could build the best product. It was about who could reach deepest into the most primitive parts of the human mind. The parts that respond to novelty. The parts that cannot ignore a social signal. The parts that light up for variable reward, the same neurological mechanism behind a slot machine, and keep reaching even when the reward stops coming. He named it. He showed the data. And then he watched the industry continue, because the economics of attention are too profitable to pause for conscience. This is where most people stop. They hear this, they feel a brief surge of anger or recognition, and then they pick up their phone to share the thought with someone. The system recaptures them in the moment of their own clarity. That is how precise the engineering is. They built it to hold you. Not you specifically. All of you. Every person with a limbic system and a social instinct and a brain that was shaped by 200,000 years of survival, not by infinite digital content. You were never designed for this environment. The engineers knew that. They used it. The truth is, this is not an argument for victimhood. Knowing you are outgunned is not permission to surrender. It is the first accurate piece of information you have been given about the fight you are actually in. You cannot win a war you have misdiagnosed. For years, you called this a willpower problem. It is not. It is a systems problem. And systems can be understood. Systems can be countered. Most people react. You choose. That is the entire distance between a person controlled by their attention and a person who controls it. One word. Choice. But choice requires awareness. And awareness requires that you first stop calling your struggle a personal failure. They built it to hold you. That is not an excuse. That is the starting line. Every time you feel the pull, every time the hand moves toward the phone before the mind has made a decision, remember that phrase. Not with anger. With recognition. You are not weak in that moment. You are facing something that was engineered, tested, refined, and optimized to feel exactly as irresistible as it feels. And now you know it. Put the phone face down. Sit in the room. Notice what that silence feels like, that strange, unfamiliar quiet when the feed stops and the notifications rest, and there is nothing pulling at you. It feels odd. It may even feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is important. It means something. Chapter 2. The silence you can no longer stand. The phone is face down on the table. The room is quiet. And something unexpected is happening. You do not feel peaceful. You feel restless. You feel the pull of something unfinished, some notification unchecked, some feed unscrolled. The silence, which should feel like relief, feels instead like a problem to be solved. And the most natural thing in the world right now would be to reach across that table and end it. Do not. What you are feeling is not boredom. Boredom is a neutral state. What you are feeling is withdrawal. Your brain, trained over months and years of constant stimulation, is reacting to the absence of input the way any conditioned system reacts when the stimulus is removed. With protest. With discomfort. With a very convincing argument that something urgent needs your attention right now. Nothing urgent needs your attention right now. That feeling is a symptom, not a signal. The truth is, the human mind was never meant to be constantly entertained. For most of human history, silence was the default state. Thought was the primary activity. People sat with problems for long periods without external input, and the mind, left to its own resources, generated insight, connection, and meaning. That capacity has not disappeared. It has been buried. In 2014, researchers at the University of Virginia ran a study that has since become impossible to ignore. They placed participants in a room alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. No phone, no book, no music. Just themselves. A significant portion of those participants chose to administer mild electric shocks to themselves, rather than sit quietly for the full 15 minutes. They chose physical pain over mental stillness. This is where most people stop. They read that study and laugh or shake their heads, then reach for their phones. They do not ask the more important question. The question is, would you have pressed the button? Be honest. Most people react. The discomfort arrives, and the hand moves. Not because you are weak. Because no one ever taught you to sit inside discomfort and wait for it to pass. Every technology in your environment has been built to ensure that discomfort is never endured. Bored? Here is the content. Anxious? Here is a distraction. Lonely? Here is a feed full of other people's lives to press your face against. The system removed the teacher. The teacher was silent. They built it to hold you. And part of how it holds you is by making the alternative feel unbearable. If you can be convinced that stillness is discomfort and stimulation is relief, you will never willingly choose stillness. You will run from it every time. And in running from it, you will never develop the one capacity that separates people who think clearly from people who only react. The capacity to be alone with your mind. The truth is, your mind is not the enemy in that silence. Your mind is what has been waiting patiently behind all the noise for you to finally arrive. The thoughts that surface when you sit quietly are not random. They are the thoughts that matter. The things you have been avoiding. The clarity you have been too distracted to access. The honest assessment of your own life that constant consumption has been keeping just out of reach. This is where most people stop. Right here. When important thoughts start surfacing, the discomfort intensifies. And the phone, face down on that table, suddenly feels like rescue. Leave it there. Attention atrophy is real. It is measurable. The brain's ability to sustain self-generated thought weakens without practice, the same way a muscle weakens without use. You did not lose your ability to concentrate in one moment. It eroded gradually, scroll by scroll, notification by notification, over years of choosing stimulation over stillness. And it will be rebuilt the same way. Gradually. Through the repeated, uncomfortable choice to stay in the silence instead of escaping it. Most people react. You choose. Every minute you sit with that discomfort without reaching for relief, you are doing the work. Not the visible work. Not the work anyone else can see or praise. The foundational work. The kind that makes every other kind of work possible. The silence is not empty. It is what your mind sounds like before you drown it out. You have now felt what distraction has been protecting you from. The next question is this: what is the room you are working in actually doing to your ability to think? Not the phone. The room itself. The desk, the notifications, the open browser tabs, the ambient noise. Chapter 3: Environments Built Against You. Look at the room you are in right now. Not abstractly. Actually, look at it. Count the objects within arm's reach that have, at some point today, pulled you away from a thought mid-sentence. The phone. The second screen. The browser has 11 tabs open. The coffee cup you got up to refill at the exact moment you were about to solve something. The notification light is blinking in your peripheral vision like a slow, patient predator. This is not a workspace. This is an interrupted environment with a desk. The truth is, most people treat focus as something they summon through motivation, through deciding to concentrate hard enough to push through the surrounding noise. They believe the room is neutral. They believe the environment is just a backdrop. This is one of the most expensive assumptions a person can make, because the environment is not a backdrop. The environment is the primary variable. And right now, your environment is working against you. This is not accidental either. The open office plan, which became the dominant workplace design of the 21st century, was originally sold as a collaboration tool. What the research showed was different. Studies consistently found that open offices reduced productivity, increased stress, and fragmented attention to the point that sustained cognitive work became nearly impossible. The average knowledge worker in an open office is interrupted or self-interrupts every 3 to 5 minutes. A focus session of that length is not focused. It is the rehearsal of distraction. Most people react. They accept the environment they are placed in because changing it feels like a statement, like an accusation, like being difficult. They put on headphones and call it a solution. The headphones help, but they do not solve the structural problem. Cal Newport, whose work on deep work has become foundational reading for anyone serious about cognitive performance, documented what he called the metric black hole of knowledge work. Because it is difficult to measure the output of thinking, most workplaces default to measuring the appearance of engagement. Being responsive. Being reachable. Being present in the chat window. And so the environments get optimized not for thinking, but for the performance of thinking. You are rewarded for availability, which is the direct enemy of depth. They built it to hold you. Not just the phone. The entire environment you live and work in. The culture of the open inbox, the always-on Slack channel, the expectation of instant reply, these are not neutral features of professional life. They are structural guarantees that no one in the building will ever think deeply enough to produce something genuinely original. This is where most people stop. They acknowledge the problem, feel a brief, genuine frustration with the systems around them, and then return to those systems because dismantling them feels overwhelming and the cost of resistance is too high. The cost of compliance is higher. You just cannot see the invoice for years. The truth is, you do not need permission to design your environment for the work that actually matters. You need a clear understanding of the principle, make the right thing the only available thing. Every element of your workspace that enables distraction is not neutral furniture. It is a loaded variable working against your cognitive output every hour it is present. Most people react to their environment. They respond to whatever demands the loudest attention. You can choose differently. You can decide before you sit down to work what the room is going to ask of you. A cleared surface. A single document is open. Notifications silenced, not on vibrate, silenced. A time boundary that is treated as a closed door, not a suggestion. This is not minimalism as an aesthetic. This is precision as a discipline. The workspace you design this week is the mind you will think with this year. They are not separate. The external environment and the internal one mirror each other with a fidelity that most people never take seriously until they experience a genuinely protected hour of deep work and realize, with something close to shock, what their minds are actually capable of when nothing is pulling at them. You have now seen the room for what it is. You have acknowledged what it has been costing you. The next step moves inward, past the room, past the phone, past the notification, and the tab and the open inbox. The next step asks what focus actually is at the level of the brain itself, and why you have likely never experienced the real thing. Chapter 4. Design the room. Design the mind. Victor Hugo had a deadline he could not meet. He had promised his publisher a novel. The deadline came, then passed. Hugo, one of the most disciplined writers in European literary history, had spent the contracted period doing everything except the work. Dinners, salons, correspondence. The full texture of a social life that felt, in each individual moment, more immediately rewarding than sitting alone with a manuscript. His solution was not motivational. He did not find a new reason to write. He did not wait for inspiration to arrive or discipline to strengthen. He had his servant lock away every item of clothing he owned, making it physically impossible to leave the house. Then he sat down and wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This is not a story about eccentricity. This is a case study in environmental design as the primary lever of human performance. The truth is, willpower is a depletable resource. This is not a metaphor. It is a finding replicated across decades of psychological research. The brain's capacity for self-regulation draws from a finite pool that is diminished by every decision made, every temptation resisted, every moment of conscious override throughout the day. By the time most people sit down to do serious work in the afternoon, their willpower is already significantly depleted, and they wonder why they reach for the phone. Most people react by trying harder. They tell themselves to focus more, care more, and want it more. They treat the failure of willpower as a character deficiency and pile shame on top of depletion. And then they fail again tomorrow. You are not going to try harder. You are going to design smarter. The principle is this: make the right thing the only available thing. It is 3 words that collapse an entire philosophy of performance into something executable. When Hugo locked away his clothes, he made leaving impossible. The work became the only available option. He did not rely on wanting to write more than he wanted to go to dinner. He removed the dinner as a competing option. Apply this to your desk. Apply this to your phone. Apply this to the browser on your screen. A single open document is not a limitation. It is a declaration. It tells your brain before a single word is written or a single calculation made, that this is what we are doing and there is nothing else. The brain, an extraordinary pattern recognition system, responds to environmental cues with remarkable obedience. A cluttered surface signals a fractured task. A cleared surface signals a singular purpose. You are not managing your mind when you sit down to work. You are programming it with whatever the environment presents. This is where most people stop. They understand the principle intellectually and then open 17 browser tabs anyway, because closing them feels like losing something. Information they might need. A reference they might want. A thought they do not trust themselves to remember. Write it on paper. Then close the tab. The thought does not disappear. The distraction does. The truth is, the physical and the digital are not separate environments. They are the same environment expressed in 2 registers. A clear desk with an open social media feed on the screen is not a focused workspace. It is a distracted mind wearing productivity as a costume. Both registers must be addressed together. The desk and the screen. The room and the device. Most people react to whatever the environment presents. The notification arrives, and the attention moves. The new tab is 1 click away, and the thought wanders. You are going to make a different set of choices, not by being stronger in the moment, but by reducing the number of moments where strength is required. Remove the notification. Remove the tab. Remove the object that holds the pull. Make the right thing the only available thing. The room you design this week is the mind you will have this year. That is not poetic language. That is the literal mechanism. The external architecture of your workspace becomes the internal architecture of your cognition, 1 session at a time, until focused work is not an exception you fight for, but the natural result of conditions you have built. Victor Hugo did not write that novel because he wanted to more than any other day. He wrote it because he made the irrelevant irrelevant. Now you understand the room. Now you understand the conditions. The next question is deeper and more important. What is actually happening inside the brain when it focuses, And why does every genuine focus session begin with friction that most people mistake for failure? Chapter 5. What focus actually is. There is a moment, about 12 minutes into serious work, that most people never reach. It is the moment when the resistance drops, where the task stops feeling like something you are pushing against and starts feeling like something you are inside, where the quality of thought changes, becomes sharper, less effortful, more generative. Athletes call it being in the zone. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi called it flow. Neuroscience has a more precise and less romantic name for it. It calls it the task-positive network engaging at sufficient depth. And the reason most people never get there is that they quit during the 12 minutes before it. The truth is, the brain does not enter deep focus the way you enter a room, by stepping through a door and arriving. It enters the way an engine warms up, gradually, with friction, with resistance, with a period of inefficiency that is not a malfunction but a biological requirement. The first stretch of any serious cognitive session is neurologically uncomfortable by design. The brain's default mode network, which supports mind-wandering, self-referential thought, and processing of the past and future, does not readily yield to the task-positive network. That resistance is not a signal that the work is wrong. It is not a signal that today is not the right day. It is the cost of entry. Every time. Most people react to that friction by stopping. They sit down to write, or think, or build, and the first few minutes feel hard and unproductive, so they check the phone because it always rewards them immediately. No warm-up required. No friction to push through. The dopamine arrives in the first second. And so the brain, which is an optimization system, begins to prefer the phone over the work, not because the phone is more valuable, but because it is more immediately rewarding. This is the mechanics of how distraction becomes addiction. Not in a metaphorical sense. In a clinical one. Andrew Huberman's research on ultradian rhythms revealed a pattern that should change how everyone approaches their workday. The human brain operates in roughly 90-minute focus cycles, with transitions between cycles that involve a period of reduced capacity. But within each cycle, the opening phase, the first 5 to 15 minutes, is characterized by elevated norepinephrine and a mild stress response as the brain shifts from diffuse to focus mode. That stress response feels like resistance. It feels like the work is too hard, or you are not ready, or something else needs to be handled first. It is none of those things. It is your brain doing exactly what it is supposed to do before it can do what you need it to do. The discomfort at the start is the cost of entry. This is where most people stop. They interpret the cost as a verdict. They say, I am not a focused person. I am not built for deep work. I cannot concentrate for long periods. And every one of those statements is built on the false evidence of quitting before the warm-up ends. The truth is, the capacity for deep focus is not a personality trait. It is a skill. And like every skill, it exists on a continuum. It degrades without practice and rebuilds with consistent, deliberate repetition. The person who calls themselves unfocused is not describing a biological limit. They are describing the current state of an underdeveloped capacity. Most people react by accepting that description as permanent. You do not. Here is what changes when you understand neuroscience. You stop treating the first 12 minutes as evidence. You treat them as a procedure. You sit down, begin, and do not evaluate the quality of the session until the warm-up is complete. You do not check the phone during the friction. You do not reorganize the desk. You do not make coffee. You stay in the discomfort and wait because you now know that the thing you are waiting for is real and coming. The discomfort at the start is the cost of entry. Pay it every time. Without negotiation. Without the reassurance of early results. The session that begins in friction and stays in friction anyway is the session that eventually breaks through into the kind of thought most people have stopped believing they are capable of. You are capable of it. You have simply been quitting 11 minutes too soon. You now understand the biology. You understand the room, the environment, and the architecture of a protected focus session. The next question is about what happens inside that session when it runs well. Because deep focus is not just about concentration. It is about the method of engagement. And the method has a single non-negotiable rule. Chapter 6. One thing. Complete it. Move on. Right now, the average professional has 37 browser tabs open. Not 37 pieces of information they are actively using. 37 pieces of information they are not willing to let go of, because closing a tab feels like losing something, like admitting that thought did not matter, like making a decision about what is worth keeping. And so the tabs stay open. And the desk has 4 projects on it. And the inbox has 62 unread messages being monitored in the background, while the work that actually matters is attempted in the foreground. This is not multitasking. Multitasking is a fiction. What this is task fragmentation. And it is destroying the quality of everything you produce. The truth is, the human brain does not run processes in parallel the way a computer does. When you believe you are doing 2 things at once, what you are actually doing is rapidly switching between them, each switch incurring a cost. That cost has a name in the research literature. It is called attention residue. And it is more expensive than most people can afford. Sophie Leroy, a researcher at the University of Minnesota, quantified attention residue for the first time, and the findings were severe. When a person switches from one task to another, a fragment of their cognitive attention remains on the first task. Not metaphorically. Measurably. Performance on the new task is degraded by the residue of the unfinished previous one. And the more tasks in active rotation, the heavier the residue, the more degraded the performance on each of them. The professional who task switches 30 times a day is not a productive, busy person. They are a capable person who produces below 20% of what they are actually able to deliver, because 90% of their cognitive capacity is distributed across tasks they are not currently performing. Most people react by calling this the nature of modern work. They say it cannot be helped. They say the inbox demands it, the team demands it, the pace of the industry demands it. They are correct that these pressures exist. They are wrong that compliance is the only option. Finish the thought. Then move. This is not a time management strategy. It is a cognitive preservation discipline. A single task held in full attention until it is complete or intentionally and deliberately paused produces qualitatively different output than the same task worked on in fragments across an interrupted afternoon. This is true for writing. It is true for design. It is true for analysis, for programming, for any work that requires the brain to hold complexity and navigate it with precision. You cannot hold complexity and monitor 3 other things at the same time. The monitoring always wins. Complexity always loses. This is where most people stop. They agree that single tasking is superior and then open their email while reading this, because the habit of fracture is so deeply grooved that agreement with a principle is not enough to interrupt it. The groove is stronger than the agreement. Which means the groove must be deliberately replaced, not through motivation but through structure. Close everything that is not the task. Not minimize. Close. The minimized window is still an open cognitive commitment. The closed window is finished. The cleared desk is a statement of intent. One document, one problem, one question, one creative challenge. Nothing else is eligible for attention until that thing is done or the session is over. Most people react to every incoming signal. You're going to make incoming signals structurally impossible during your focus window. Notifications off, not on silent, off. Email closed, not minimized, closed. The phone is in another room, not face down on the desk. Face down on the desk is still present. Another room is a different variable entirely. The truth is, every open tab is a vote of no confidence in your ability to remember what matters. Every background notification is an admission that you do not trust yourself to return to the work. The single tasker is not someone who has suppressed their curiosity or become rigid in their thinking. They are someone who has learned to trust themselves enough to close the tabs, do the work, and know that the other things will still exist when the session is over. Finish the thought. Then move. This is the method. The room is designed. The biology is understood. The method is single tasking, defended by structure, practiced with consistency, and protected from the cultural mythology that equates busyness and productivity. They are not the same thing. Busyness is the performance of effort. Productivity is the result of depth. And depth requires that you be in one place, completely, for long enough to produce something that could not have been produced in fragments. You know the method now. But the method has an adversary that is not external. It is not the phone, the tab, or the notification. It lives inside the work session itself, and it arrives precisely when the work starts to matter. Chapter 7. The Mind That Pulls You Back. The room is quiet. The desk is cleared. The phone is in another room. The document is open. Everything is in place. And then your own mind betrays you. Not the phone. Not a notification. Not a colleague at the door. Your mind creates an interruption within the work itself. A sudden memory of an email you forgot to send. A nagging feeling that you left something unresolved this morning. A thought about dinner, about a conversation from 3 days ago, about whether you locked the car, about something someone said in a meeting last week that you should probably respond to. None of it is urgent. All of it feels urgent. And in the space between that feeling and your response to it is the exact location where most focus sessions are lost. The truth is, the greatest source of distraction for a trained, disciplined person is not the environment. The environment can be controlled. The mind cannot be silenced. It will generate its own interruptions with the same precision and the same timing as any external system, because that is what an untrained mind does when it encounters depth. It retreats to the familiar surface. Marcus Aurelius understood this, not as a philosophical abstraction, but as a daily operational problem. He was the emperor of Rome, commanding armies, administering an empire, managing a court full of people competing for his attention and his favor. And in the private pages of Meditations, the journal he never intended to publish, he wrote repeatedly about one practice and one practice only: return to the task. Not achieve perfect focus. Not silence the mind. Return to the task. Again and again. Without drama. Without self-punishment for having wandered. Without the internal lecture about what focus is supposed to look like. Just notice the drift and return. This is where most people stop. They notice the intrusive thought and follow it because it feels productive. They open the email app to send the message they just remembered. They spend 4 minutes in the inbox. They emerge 9 minutes later with 3 new tasks and no memory of where they were in the work they left. The intrusive thought was not urgent. The response to it was not necessary. But the habit of following every internal signal is so automatic that by the time the decision is made, it has already been made. Most people react. The thought arrives, and the body moves. You are going to learn to see the gap between the thought arriving and the body moving, and you are going to choose what happens in that gap. The return is the practice, not the sustained, unbroken hour of perfect concentration. That is a fantasy that most people use as an excuse to not begin, because they know the hour will not be perfect, and so they wait for a better day. The practice is not a perfect session. The practice is the moment of catching the drift and returning, without ceremony, without self-judgment, without losing 3 more minutes to frustration about having lost 30 seconds to distraction. The return is the practice. Marcus Aurelius did not write in Meditations about the days when thought came easily, when the mind was clear, and the work flowed without effort. He wrote about the discipline of return because that is what the actual practice looks like from the inside. Messy, repetitive, unglamorous, and effective in ways no external system can provide. The truth is, the mind that wanders during deep work is not a broken mind. It is a normal mind encountering a hard task and defaulting to a more comfortable register. The difference between people who consistently produce deep work and those who do not is not that the first group has a mind that does not wander. It is the first group that has developed the reflex of return to the point where it is faster than the reflex of escape. Build that reflex. Do it the same way Marcus Aurelius built it, through daily repetition, through the unglamorous practice of noticing and returning, through treating each return not as a failure recovered from but as a repetition completed. Most people react to the wandering mind with shame or resignation. You are going to respond to it with a single, practiced movement. Back to the work. No lecture. No renegotiation with the intrusive thought. No promise to address it later in a note that never gets written. Just, back to the work. Every time you return, you are stronger than you were in the moment before the drift. Not by much. But the accumulation of those returns, across days, across weeks, across months of consistent practice, is the mechanism by which ordinary attention becomes extraordinary focus. The return is the practice. That is the whole philosophy, made executable. You have now looked at the internal adversary and clearly named it. You have the tool to counter it. But focus is not only a cognitive practice. It is a relational one. Because the person who has spent years chronically distracted has not only lost depth of thought. They have lost depth of presence with the people around them. Chapter 8. The People You Stopped Seeing. There is a dinner table in this story. Everyone at it is present physically. No one at it is actually there. One person is checking sports scores under the table. One person is composing a work message. They told themselves they would just send it quickly. The children are eating in silence, used to it, not because they prefer it, but because they have learned that this is what dinner looks like now. And across the table, two people who built a life together are sitting 18 inches apart and occupying entirely different worlds. This is not a dramatic scene. It is Tuesday. The truth is, distraction is not a private cost. Every person who has absorbed the lessons of this book so far has been thinking primarily about their own productivity, focus, and cognitive output. That framing is correct, but incomplete. Because the person who cannot sustain attention is not only producing worse work, but also they are being a worse parent, a worse partner, a worse friend, a worse colleague, in ways that are more consequential and more permanent than any professional shortfall. You cannot be present in a conversation. Your attention has already left. Researchers at the University of Essex ran a study that is worth sitting with. They brought two people together for a conversation and placed a smartphone on the table between them. Not belonging to either participant. Not ringing. Not lighting up. Simply present. Face up on the table, visible to both people. The result was measurable and consistent. The quality of the conversation declined, the perceived empathy of both participants dropped, and both people reported feeling less connected to each other after the conversation than before. The phone did not ring. It did not distract anyone in the conventional sense. Its mere presence was enough to signal that something else was available, and that signal degraded the human connection happening directly across the table. This is where most people stop. They read that study and apply it to other people. They think of someone they know who is always on their phone, someone whose distraction they have felt and resented. They do not apply it inward. Do they not ask the harder question? When was the last time you were fully present for an entire conversation? Not mostly present. Not present except for the few seconds you glanced at the notification. Fully, completely, unambiguously present for the full duration of a conversation with another human being? Most people react to that question by going quiet. Because the honest answer is not recent. Where your attention goes, your relationships follow. This is not an abstraction. It is the operating reality of every interaction you have. The person across from you knows, at a level that does not require articulation, whether you are inside the conversation or managing it from a distance. They can feel the quality of your attention just as you can feel a change in room temperature. They may not name it. They may not confront you about it. But they feel it, and it accumulates. The truth is, chronic distraction is a form of chronic absence. You can be in a room without being in a room. You can listen to words without hearing meaning. You can be physically available to those who need you while remaining cognitively and emotionally unreachable. And the people who love you, who depend on you, who are forming their understanding of what attention and care look like based on what they see from you, they are absorbing all of it. Most people react to this realization with guilt. Guilt is not the goal. Clarity is. The goal is this: the same discipline you are building for the desk, the cleared workspace, the protected focus session, the deliberate single task. This discipline is also the discipline of presence with another person. You do not need a different skill for the dinner table than for the desk. You need the same skill applied to a different context. Put the phone in another room. Close the tab of your own internal to-do list. Return to the person in front of you every time your attention drifts, the same way you return to the work. The return is the practice. It works at the dinner table too. Where your attention goes, your relationships follow. You choose, every day and in every interaction, whether you are building or eroding the connections that sustain you. The phone on the table is a vote against connection. Putting it in another room is a vote for it. Neither vote is dramatic. Both votes accumulate. You now understand what distraction costs at the personal level, at work, in the room, in the mind, and in relationships. The final reckoning is larger than all of these. Because there is a cost that sits above productivity and above relationships, and it is the one that most people spend their entire lives successfully avoiding looking at directly. Chapter 9. The Life You Are Not Living. Seneca was not a monk. He was a statesman, an advisor to emperors, a man of considerable wealth and power living in the most complex political environment of the ancient world. He was not writing from a position of comfortable detachment when he picked up his pen and addressed a letter to his friend Lucilius about time. He was writing from the middle of a life that had demanded everything from him, and from a growing recognition that most of what had demanded things from him had not deserved them. He wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." He wrote that in 65 AD. Nothing about that sentence has aged. The truth is, this book has been building toward a reckoning that is not about focus as a professional tool. Focus, as a productivity technique, is the smallest version of this argument. The largest version is this: the way you spend your attention is the way you spend your life. Not a portion of your life. Not the working portion. All of it. Every hour that passes is an hour in which you are attending to something. The only question that matters at the scale Seneca was operating at, is whether what you were attending to was worth the hour it cost. Scroll through your phone for 45 minutes. You have spent 45 minutes of your one life attending to content designed by engineers to capture your attention for profit. You will not remember what you saw. You will not be improved by it. You will not be more connected, more informed, or more prepared for anything that matters. Those 45 minutes are gone with the same finality as any other 45 minutes, and they were spent in the service of someone else's business model. This is where most people stop. Not because they disagree. Because agreeing is unbearable. If you allow yourself to fully receive what Seneca was saying, and what this book has been saying in its own register, the implications for how you have been spending your attention are significant enough to produce genuine grief. And most people prefer the distraction to the grief. But the grief is honest. Grief is the appropriate response to an accurate accounting of how much time has been lost to low-quality attention. And grief, unlike guilt, is productive. Grief means something mattered. Grief means you can see clearly enough to name the loss. And the person who can see clearly enough to name the loss can make different choices going forward. Most people react to the awareness of wasted time with one of two responses. They either dismiss it, everyone does it, it is just how things are now, or they spiral into self-condemnation that is so consuming it becomes its own form of distraction. Neither response is useful. Both responses are ways of avoiding the only response that changes anything: the decision. The truth is, you are not killing time. Time is killing you. Not cruelly. Not dramatically. In the most patient, quiet, incremental way imaginable. 1 hour at a time. One scroll at a time. One 45-minute gap in your memory at a time, until the years have passed and the accounting is done. And what you find is that the life you had was attended to by you only partially, only intermittently, only in the spaces between distractions. Seneca had no phone. His distractions were banquets, political obligations, and the slow corruption of a court that rewarded compliance over integrity. He still found the mechanism to be the same. Attention squandered on the unimportant is attention taken permanently from the important. The delivery system changes across centuries. The mechanism does not. Most people react to mortality awareness with avoidance. You are going to use it differently. You are going to use it the way Seneca used it, as a clarifying lens that makes the question of how to spend the next hour suddenly very serious. Where your attention goes, your life follows. Not your success. Your life. The experience of being alive, the texture of your days, the quality of your thought, the depth of your relationships, the degree to which you are actually present for the events that made up your existence. All of it is downstream of attention. This is where most people stop. You do not stop here. You carry this reckoning forward into the way you work tomorrow morning, the way you sit at the dinner table tomorrow evening, the way you respond to the first notification that arrives before you have finished your first cup of coffee. You have sat with the full cost. You have looked at it without flinching. Now there is only one thing left. Not a new framework, not a new system, not a new set of rules. Something simpler and more durable than any of those things. Chapter 10. The Practice of Returning. Everything in this book has been leading to a single movement. Not a revelation. Not a conclusion you sit with and then set aside. A movement. Physical, repeatable, and available to you in any moment of any day, regardless of what surrounds you. The movement is this: come back to the work. That is the whole of it. Not as a slogan. As a practice. The most important thing you can do with what you have learned is understand that knowledge without repetition is just information, and information without action is just noise. You have had enough noise. What you need now is practice. The truth is, the people who do work that matters do not have a different brain than you. They do not have access to a focus that is unavailable to you by nature or by circumstance. What they have is a practice. A daily, unglamorous, non-negotiable commitment to returning to the work, to the desk, to the present moment, to the one task in front of them, every time the drift occurs and every time the environment attempts its interruption. They are not doing something extraordinary. They are doing something ordinary with extraordinary consistency. Think of the master craftsman. Not the celebrity. Not the person who has been profiled and turned into a symbol. The anonymous one. The furniture maker in a small workshop. The surgeon who has performed the same procedure 10,000 times and brings full presence to the 10,001st. The chess grandmaster who sits across from an opponent and occupies the board completely, with nothing else in the room of their attention. What do all of them share? Not talent. Talent is distributed widely and often goes nowhere. Not intelligence. Intelligence without focused application produces nothing that outlasts it. What they share is the cultivated capacity to be completely inside the work. Not adjacent to it. Not managing it from a distance while monitoring three other things. Inside it. Fully. For the duration. That capacity was built through repetition. Through sitting down when sitting down was hard. Through returning when the mind drifted. By protecting the session when the environment is under pressure. Through choosing depth again and again, in the ordinary moments that no one documents and no one applauds. Most people react to the scale of that commitment by feeling discouraged. It sounds like too much. It sounds like a version of discipline they do not currently possess and cannot imagine acquiring. You already started acquiring it. You started the moment you recognized the phone's pull as a designed mechanism rather than a personal weakness. You continued it every time in this book. You felt the urge to check something and did not. Every moment of attention you gave to these ideas instead of giving it to the feed was a repetition. You have been practicing since the first page. This is where most people stop. You do not stop here. Stopping here is the one failure that the entire structure of this book was built to prevent. The truth is, the practice is not something you complete. It is something you maintain. There is no finish line beyond which focus is guaranteed, beyond which the phone loses its pull, and distraction becomes impossible. The pull will always exist. The environment will always have competing demands. The mind will always generate its own interruptions. The practice is the response to all of it, consistent, disciplined, and immediate. Come back to the work. When the notification arrives and the attention moves, come back to the work. When the silence in the room feels unbearable, and the phone is within easy reach, come back to the work. When the intrusive thought surfaces in the middle of the session and spins into three other thoughts, and suddenly 5 minutes have passed, come back to the work. When the dinner table becomes the moment, and the people across from you are speaking, come back to them. Come back to life. Most people react. You choose. Not once. Not today. Tomorrow you will see. Every time. As a practice, as a discipline, as the foundational commitment of a person who has decided that their attention belongs to them and to the things and people they have chosen to give it to, not to a system that was built to take it. They built it to hold you. You know that now. And knowing it, you can choose differently every time the pull arrives. Not perfectly. Not without the occasional loss. But consistently. Deliberately. With the clarity of someone who has looked at the full cost and decided the bill is too high to keep paying. Come back to the work. This is the practice. This is the instruction. This is the only sentence in this entire book that needs to survive everything else you forget, because it contains within it the entire philosophy, the environmental design, the single tasking, the stoic return, the relational presence, the mortality awareness. All of it collapses into 3 words that can be executed right now, in this moment, regardless of what surrounds you. Put the distraction down. Turn toward the work. Begin. Not later. Not after one more scroll. Not after you send the message you just remembered. Now. This moment. This is where the book ends, and the practice starts. Come back to the work. You started this with 45 minutes missing from your day and no memory of where they went. You now know where they went. They were taken systematically by systems built to take them, by a culture that rewards busyness over depth, and by a mind never taught to resist the pull. Here is what you now know. Your environment determines your attention before your willpower ever gets involved. Your mind will always resist the start of real work, and that resistance is not a signal, it is a transition. Multitasking is not a feature, it is a fracture. Silence is not emptiness. It is what clarity sounds like before you fill it with noise. You know that every time your attention wanders and you bring it back, you are stronger. You know that the people in front of you deserve the same presence you give to a screen. You know that Seneca was right, not that life is short, but that you have been spending yours in the wrong direction. And you know the only move that matters. Not the app. Not the system. Not the perfect morning. One move. Come back to the work. Every hour of your remaining life, that is the choice. Drift or return. Be taken or be present. Live at the surface or go deep enough to do something that actually deserves the time you give it. You were given a mind capable of extraordinary focus. Now use it.